I'm Dr. Dave Janda. Welcome back to the Insider Insight Show. I am honored to have back with me actually someone who is an incredible American and worldwide patriot because he focuses on educating, empowering, and communicating information to as many people as possible. You know, a lot of folks want to hide in their basement and just kind of talk to themselves or talk to a relative. Not Ron Medykiewicz. He wants to talk to the world, and he does, in fact, and in fact helps the world. You know, Ron is a busy guy. He had two careers. He's a retired electrical engineer from Hewlett-Packard, and he is also a retired college instructor from Delaware Technological Community College. Ron has been blessed by having these careers essentially in his lifelong passion and love, that being electronics, and he has been licensed as an amateur radio operator since 1973, and his call sign is WA3VEE, right on his shirt there, I think.
Yeah.
That's nice. He's also a trustee of K3DTS, which is his ham radio club, the Spark to Space Amateur Radio Club. His club's mission is to bring awareness of ham radio to the public, to present licensing courses, and to mentor new amateur radio operators. He is active in emergency radio communications, public service, and is very active on the amateur radio bands. Ron lives in Westchester, PA, a beautiful community, and he is a U.S. Army Signal Corps veteran and a senior life member of the Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers and a life member of American Radio Relay League. You know, Ron has been on our radio show, and the feedback, no pun intended, I guess, the feedback I received about Ron, folks were absolutely mesmerized by his appearance on our radio show because the information he discussed about communicating through the ham radio network and how it does play in all these emergency situations. But in particular, he focused on what happened during Hurricane Helen and the positive impact and the lives saved because of ham radio operators. It's my honor to welcome Ron Medykiewicz. Ron, welcome to the Operation Freedom platform and the Insider Insight Show.
Thank you, Dr. Dave. It's a pleasure and an honor. I'm humbled to be here, actually. This is very good, and this is a great forum, and I appreciate everything you're doing with Operation Freedom.
Well, I thank you. You know, Ron, when I look at the ham radio network operating organizations and the people involved are very dedicated throughout our country and around the world in communicating information to help others. But I also believe it is a victim of really poor marketing. Mm-hmm. Not by folks on the ground, but the organizations overall. So, Ron, you now have a audience who is thirsting for information on this.
Great.
Let's start with the basics about what is amateur ham radio. And then I want to get into how folks can get involved at different levels.
Great, wonderful. Well, I will start with a very tip of the fingernail history of where we came from to give people an understanding what we do today and what it means today. We are the old, like I described to the people who ask me what is ham radio? I start off usually with things that they're familiar with and say, well, we're the old Marconi guys. And most of the people today think we died with Marconi, which is so far from the truth. And so we're the old original Morse code guys, but that is not a requirement anymore to be an amateur radio operator. So it started out that we would relay signals from one place to another, and that became the basis for our advocacy group organization, the American Radio Relay League. Okay, the ARRL, which I'll talk more about later on, I hope. But nonetheless, we're the original people who just passed messages by Morse code. Then it grew into voice. Now it's computers, and jump ahead about 6 or 7 decades. Now it's computerized. It uses modern technology. We have some of the most state-of-the-art radio equipment that we use. And we do digital AM, FM. What's called single sideband, which is a modified form of amplitude modulation. We do amateur television, and I mentioned FM. We use local repeaters, and I'll explain those shortly. And because that's going to be a way for us to get local communications. And we use a whole bunch of different modulation methods. A lot of people confuse us with CB. We are not CB. I've been licensed, it'll be 52 years in July this year, and I have never been a CBer ever. CB is one band, and it is very unregulated. Let's just say the language used and the etiquette used are very much not socially acceptable in many cases. It is a form of communications, but it's not what ham radio is. We are completely different. We are a regulated service. We follow the rules of the Federal Communications Commission, and I'll explain that those rules are there for a real purpose. And the thing is that we do not allow any profanity. We don't allow any music. We don't allow any kind of any willful interference. Sometimes it's unavoidable, but if it's unavoidable, we stop it. So we're very regulated, very regimented, and we are mainly interested in communicating with other amateur radio operators or communicating with third parties when we are legally able to, as long as there is an amateur radio operator present. We do communication. We do experimentation. As Dr. Dave mentioned, my lifelong passion has been electronics, so that fits beautifully with this, with my station and with what I've been doing in amateur radio. I fix radios, I fix test equipment, and I'm always building things. I'm always doing things. So we're all experimenting. We were one of the ones, and a lot of the technologies that have come out in the world actually were pioneered in amateur radio. None of this stuff is known out there at all. And for example, cell technology. We were making phone calls from our cars using a system called Auto Patch. And I invite you to look this, use a browser of your choice and search for this ham radio Auto Patch in the 1970s, long before the technology developed to use the higher frequencies that enabled cellular service. So we were doing this already in the 1970s from our vehicles using repeaters. So that's basically what we do. We communicate, we experiment, we develop new tech. By our hobbies and by our existence, we develop new technologies. The other thing, because one last point, and probably the most important point, is that we do not most of our equipment runs on the voltage that is used in a regular gasoline powered vehicle, and that is 12 volts, 13.8 volts. Because of that, we don't have to rely on commercial power. The main breaker in the house here can go off, and I can still operate my station because it's running on backup power, it's running on batteries. So we have communications when everything else fails. We don't depend upon the internet. We use the internet, by the way, to search for other stations and as a help and so on. And I'll also talk about how to listen on the internet, hopefully later on as well. But nonetheless, it is not essential to us providing one of the main reasons that we exist as sanctioned by the FCC, and that is a public service and a group of trained, and this is right out of the rules, right out of part 47. We are a trained cadre of radio operators who are skilled in radio communication, and we can provide emergency communication on the fly with no reliance on the existing infrastructure. That's probably the most important point. So I hope I answered the question.
No, you haven't. In your introduction, I mentioned that during times of emergency services or times of disaster relief, educate our listeners about Hurricane Helene and how ham radio operators really beyond filled the void that had been created when FEMA wasn't really stepping up to the plate as potentially they should have been. Educate our listeners with what happened there by way of example of the impact ham radio operators have on a community, on a country.
Well, it's not only, I'll be as succinct as possible, but it's not only Helene, but anytime there is a natural or man-made disaster, it used to be, and I wish it were more of this anymore, but it used to be when you would tune into the news, regardless what media you were listening to, you would hear, and there was an earthquake in California, there was an earthquake in Haiti, there was a volcano that was impacting life and property over in Hawaii. You would hear them say, according to ham radio operators in that area, that's us. That's us right now. So now let's focus on Helene, as Dr. Dave asked me to do. At the very end of September 28th-ish or so of last year, we all know that Hurricane Helen came up from the Gulf Coast, pretty well hit Florida, and then ended up devastating western North Carolina. And I'm familiar with that area because a year after my licensing in 1973, 1974, and again in 1976, two of my ham radio buddies who have since passed, sadly, but we all went down and camped in that area. So I'm intimately familiar with the Burnsville, Spruce Pine, Mount Mitchell, Black Mountain region of western North Carolina. And we knew the repeaters down there and so on and so forth. First of all, a repeater. A repeater is a simultaneous receiver and transmitter. So it receives signals and simultaneously transmits them at the same time, number one. Number two, these repeaters are generally located on a high spot or high tower in a general geographical area or region. What they're used for, and they're used by police, they're used by businesses, they're used by ham radio operators, and so on. What they allow people to do is they allow people who cannot talk directly to one another because either they have small handy talkies that are only 5 watts or so, but they allow them to talk with each other through the repeater. Where one person might be, for instance, over here in southeastern Pennsylvania, one person might be in Harrisburg, which is 65 miles west of where I am. I might be here in Westchester, 17 miles away from a repeater. So that other person's 40 miles away from a repeater, I'm 17 miles. We can never talk direct on 5 watts of power. We can talk very well through a repeater. So that's what a repeater is. Back to North Carolina. Now you have Mount Mitchell, which is the highest point east of the Mississippi. On that, which is 6,684 feet, that is right in the heart of where the devastation occurred. The beauty is all the devastation was below that mountain. All the water ran off the Black Mountains and the other surrounding areas into the Swananoa Valley and other places and completely washed everything away. Well, at the top of Mount Mitchell, there is a repeater, call sign N2GE, and it, because of its height, it can be heard in 5 different states. And so, fast forward to the event. What happens is there's this operator in Charlotte, North Carolina. I must be over 100 or so miles to the east. And again, this repeater has tremendous reach, and it's state operational because, again, the group down there that manages this did a very good job of making sure it had backup power, and it was very robust. The antennas still worked. The equipment was well contained. Everything worked. So this gentleman, Don Gittro, K2DMG is his call sign. He decided that he's going to get on and listen to what's going on in the mountains to the west of him. So he gets on and he says, all right, the night of the most intense storm, most intense day of the storm, he asked a question. He says, does anybody need any help? And that started an unbelievable chain of life, truly not dramatic, just a statement of fact, life-saving events on ham radio. So what he did was he is like myself, he's a member of the emergency team down there. I'm here local with Chester County, Pennsylvania. And so he knows how to handle messages and what we call traffic. Traffic are messages on ham radio. So he knows how to handle this. He also knows how to be, like me, he knows how to be a net control station. A net on ham radio is a meeting of ham radio operators, and you have one person that's a facilitator. We call them a net control. Okay, with all that background, he takes over and he says, immediately, there were hams in the area who were affected equally with the devastation, but they were hams, and they were able to take their small handy talkies like I just described, and could never talk to him direct, but they used the Mount Mitchell repeater to talk to him, and he was able to get help or get information about what roads were open, what facilities were still in existence and operational, what was not, where roads were blocked, where aid was coming in, and everything else. And so he led that operation for, I believe, 10 days, 10 hours a day.
Wow.
He was exhausted at the end.
I can imagine. Yeah.
There are programs like Ham Radio Now, Ham Radio Workbench, Ham Radio 2.0, where he was interviewed. And not only that, that repeater has a presence on Broadcastify, just like our local repeater here, the W3GMS repeater. You can listen to us online. So I went and I got, because I have a subscription, I went and I got the archives. I started listening to what he did, and it's like, I've been doing this, like I said, for over 52 years, and I just sat back in my chair and dropped my jaw and just shook my head and said, God bless this man. And actually, forgive me, I hope I don't offend anybody, but I'm Roman Catholic. I just blessed myself. I said, Jesus, save this guy. He ended up calling in such things as people who were stuck in trees, people who were stranded, needed medications, and so on. And from an organizational, so he literally saved lives and prevented property from being further destroyed, and helped alleviate the situation. This is probably the most classic and the most profound realization of ham radio. So that's basically what happened there. From the FEMA side, like I said, there is it's over here on my console. There's a manual called the NIFOG manual. It's the National Interoperability Field Operations Guide. It has all the frequencies, everything else that should be in that agencies should operate. We're in there as well, because when there's an emergency under the what's called ARES RACES, Amateur Radio Emergency Service, Radio Amateur Civil Emergency Service, of which I'm a member of. There's a lot of acronyms here, but bottom line is that RACES is part of FEMA. We're supposed to be called when there is an emergency. We do that here in southeastern Pennsylvania. We have 2 nuclear stations. We've got, of course, we got Salem down in New Jersey, but we also have 3 Mile Island, which is being reactivated. But most pertinent is Limerick. We run drills, and so FEMA and we are in the same emergency operations center together. I do not know, one final thought on North Carolina. I do not know if FEMA was ever called the local amateur radio operators down there. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't, but I must have listened to probably, easily 12 to 16 hours of recordings of what's going on down there, just out of absolute awe and just interest, absolute passion and interest, because this is what we do. I never heard of any call from FEMA for the amateur radio operators down there. That's a typical protocol also. So I don't know if that was followed, great, I missed it, and I'll be honest with you. But if it wasn't followed, I wonder why it wasn't followed, because it's typically what happens here.
And the reporting was that the level of communication from FEMA was minimal at best, right? About their way of communicating with people on the ground, while the ham radio network was doing the heavy lifting.
to your point, Dave, at one point I saw over 600 listeners on Broadcastify. 600.
Wow. Yeah.
We typically have 5 or 6 on our nets at night.
Right.
600.
Yeah.
And I was one of those. It's like, this is blessed.
Yeah.
Absolutely blessed.
So, Ron, when folks hear, and you spoke briefly about this on our radio segment we did, this really, you're bringing this forward, inspired a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And I got huge feedback, all positive, and people saying, look, one, you got to have Ron back on. Okay, we need to hear more from Ron. Number two, what I got back was, okay, I'm inspired. I really would like to get involved in this ham radio network. So the question is, Ron, educate our listeners. Some people say, well, I'd like to get my toes in the water here, and I'd like to listen. Just tune in and listen in my community or based on a repeater, get a repeater, find out, okay, I just want to do the listen. I just want to listen to start out with. Mm-hmm. And then you have other people say, no, look, I want to do more than listen. I really want to become a ham radio operator. So I guess, Ron, could you take those two tracks for me? They're not separate and distinct, but could you talk about, okay, to those that want to listen in their community, the steps they can take, and those that want to go beyond listening and become a ham radio operator?
You must have done your homework, Dave, because these are not mutually exclusive.
Right.
This is a perfect question because they're actually sequential. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you why. The first thing I recommend to my students and to my anyone interested is the first thing you do is get something and listen to it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And there's really 2 ways to do that. We really break this into local communications and what we call DX, or long distance communications. Mm-hmm. And so locally, what we have is we have these repeaters. Mm-hmm. And how you find out where the local repeater is, mm-hmm. go on a website. If I can mention a website.
Oh, yeah, go right ahead, please. It's key.
Public domain. It's called repeaterbook.com.
Okay.
And what you do is you go in on the left-hand side, you go into North American repeaters, and you can pick out your particular state, and then you can pick out your county, you can pick out your town, and you can find out. You get all these numbers, and you know what these numbers mean. Well, we'll talk about that in a second here, but nonetheless, you have like 6M, 2M, 70CM, 40, 20. What does this mean? These are all bands. Mm-hmm. Basically, you're mainly interested in what we call 2 meters or 2M and 70 cm or 70 centimeters. In a nutshell, basically, these are the wavelengths in space of the signals of the frequencies we're using. Mm-hmm. Don't worry about anything beyond that at this point.
Right.
That's how we identify. Right. So you're looking at 2M and the 70 cm. They will give you a list of frequencies. Now, what do you do with that? What you do, you can go on, the common sites out there, Amazon, Walmart, any of those sites out there, and you can look for very inexpensive handy talkies. In fact, this is one right here. This is $25. It is it's an Asian radio. It works. It just works. It's good enough. Now, I don't use this for any serious work. I would not use this if I were out in the field doing serious public service work where I needed something that I know I could really depend upon. That would be a Japanese radio. This whole station over here is all very fine quality Japanese radios out here. But in any event, you can get a radio for $25 that will hear the local repeaters. Mm-hmm. And what you really need is also an outside antenna. And all you don't need a huge beam or anything to listen to your local stations. All you need is what's called a dual band magnetic mount antenna. And there's a cable that you get an adapter for that hooks to your radio, and that will allow you to really truly hear the local repeaters. Why do we care about the local repeaters? In an emergency, like I just cited in North Carolina, this is where the local operations are going to take place. This is where you're going to find out what gas stations are open, who has power in your neighborhood, who doesn't, or in your town. Do you have water? Do you have gas? Do you have basic facilities? What about cell? Do you have cell? All this stuff is going to be localized. So this is where your local interest is. So bottom line is that you do this. And you do this before you even consider getting a license, because this will show you the protocol that we use. Call signs and all that kind of stuff, and how it all works, and signal reports and things like that. And you'll get the hang of what we do. It's actually, you only need to listen for about a day and you catch on very quickly. To this day, I still don't understand. As long as I've been in radio, Dr. Dave, I have still cannot understand air traffic control. I mean, this is not like that at all. It's very clear. This is FM, by the way. Okay. And we're not talking about the here in the sopranos and the bass notes on the guitar here. This is voice grade FM, but it's very clear. That's local stuff. Now, long distance, there's two ways to go here. I would recommend, first of all, what are called Web SDR websites. Web Software Defined Radio, Web SDR websites. Again, use the browser of your choice and search for Web SDR sites. You'll see a whole bunch all over the country. What you will find there is, this is the long distance stuff. These are the other numbers that you'll see that we talk about. You'll see 75M, 40M, 15M, things like that. Again, these are the wavelengths of the frequencies we use down there. Here's the beauty of that. Okay, you now know in an emergency situation, you now know what's going on in your local area.
That's right.
Okay? Now, you want to find out, well, how widespread is this?
Right.
Well, during the day here in my station in southeastern PA, I'm 25 miles west of Philadelphia, by the way, is where I am, and about 10 miles north of Delaware. So here, this time of day, I can reach any county in Pennsylvania, 67 counties, on what's called 40 meters or 7 megahertz. But again, that's short wave. Right. And I can listen to them on WebSDR. So when you get on these sites, you'll be able to select a particular frequency, and then you'll be able to listen. And how we use these different frequencies is that depending upon the time of day, will determine what frequency we use and how far we want to communicate. Like I said, during the day on that one band I mentioned, what's called 40 meters, regional communications, all up and down the East Coast, any county in Pennsylvania. At night, what happens is that band goes what we call long. And so I'm talking to Europe on that same frequency. I'm talking to Erie County or Tioga County, one of my favorites, beautiful up there. The same frequency. But what happens is it goes long. So if I want to talk at night, I use that same frequency. I want to talk regionally during the day. This is how you can find out what's going on. So WebSDR, if you really have about $1,000 in your pocket, what you can do is you can get a radio very similar to some of the ones I have over here in my shack that are entry-level shortwave transceivers. A transceiver is a radio that is both a receiver and a transmitter. And guess what? Every one of us has a transceiver.
Right.
It's called a cell phone. That is right. It's configured as a phone. We can't change the frequencies. We don't care what the frequencies are. That's all the carriers we have, the big name carriers that we're all familiar with. But we are all carrying radios of one kind or another, whether we realize it or not. Hey, back to the point. You can get, for example, an ICOM IC7300 for about $800, and that will cover all the high frequency bands out there. What you need outside, though, is you need a pretty good size antenna. Out back, I still, all these years, don't have a big tower. I don't have a big beam, which looks like an old-fashioned TV antenna, except it's huge. I don't have any of that. I have 2 wires out the back, and I've got over 200 countries worked over here, and all 50 states.
Because the misconception of those that at least have a little bit of familiarity with amateur radio and ham radio, they say, "Oh, you know, I have to have a huge tower in my backyard, and it's going to upset the HOA. It's going to upset the neighbors. It's going to, that's completely false."
It is false. It is false. In fact, with the new digital modes that we have, many of which were developed by a guy by the name of Joe Taylor, who was he's I think if I'm not mistaken, he actually won 2 Nobel Prizes in physics. He used to be the physics department head at Princeton University. He came up with weak signal modes. We have people in very, very, very strict HOAs who are able to run 5 and 10 watts of power on shortwave radio, talk worldwide on digital. And the HOA has no idea they have these antennas in their attic.
Wow.
It can be done. And it's being done. It's being done. I know people personally 2 miles away who are actually doing it.
So Ron, let's do a little example here. You have a daughter, let's say, who lives in LA.
Sure.
And the fires are hitting.
Yeah.
And the media is being the usual news media, and you're really not getting any pertinent information.
Right.
With you, what would you do? So she still has cell service. Dad, I don't know what's going on. I can't get any information of how I can get out of LA, which way I should go to get out of here. Dad, what can you do to help me? So what would you tell? What would Ron do in finding out what's happening on the ground?
One way to
hundreds of miles away.
Oh, sure. 2,700. Yeah, I made that Philly-San Francisco trip further up the coast quite a few times, working for a Silicon Valley company. But anyway, bottom line is that what I would do is I'd find out what the local clubs are out there. And you can do this. You get on the American Radio Relay League, ARRL.org. ARRL.org. And you search there for ham radio clubs. And what they will do is you can put in a zip code. You put in the LA zip code, or whatever, there's probably 100 zip codes out there. You put in the local zip code, and what you can try to do is you can try to contact those clubs. Now, the best thing to do is contact the club that's not in the immediate area.
Right.
For a case study, Don Gittro in Charlotte.
Right.
100 miles east of the affected area,
still
get into the repeaters in the area.
Right.
So you've got relatively local contact, and you're able to get some information, at least some information anyway. They may be able to vector you, if you can get through to those people, they may be able to vector you to actual online sites that are still operational where you can get additional information. For instance, down in North Carolina, I must have burned out the browser here by typing in drivenc.gov to find out what roads were open down there, to find out if the road that I had taken to get to the cabin years ago was affected or not. So that might be one way to do it. Another way is to get on Broadcastify, and you can select California, you can select LA County, and you can then look and see if some of the repeaters are actually listed as being online.
Okay.
Like I said, as ours is here, and you can actually listen to some of the traffic there. That's very passive. That doesn't get you specific information about your daughter's situation or not.
But it gives you a general overview.
Oh, sure. And that's what I do with the North Carolina situation. So that might be another way. Another way is to try to contact through the clubs. Again, try to contact some hams out there and set up schedules. For instance, if you find a ham that is close to your daughter, then what you can do is you can say, hey, can you possibly contact her And at this particular time, this particular frequency, we call that a sked.
Oh.
And you can actually have that ham, put her on the air, and that's completely legal, and I'll tell you why. He can put her on the air, and she could actually talk to you. And here's why it's legal. In the United States, we can do what's called third-party traffic like that because the actual amateur radio operator is the control operator. He's the one who's controlling the transmitter.
Got it.
So I can have my wife on, who has absolutely no interest in ham radio, but that's okay. We support each other. She's a very loving wife.
There you go.
40 years this month, and she said her response is, it seems like 80. But nonetheless, I thought
time flies. That. Yeah, time
but
flies
anyway,
when you're having fun.
I could put her on the air. I could put my neighbors on the air. None of them are hams around here, all because I'm controlling a microphone. So that is very possible to do. So there are ways to actually get in touch with people this way when the normal services may be disrupted.
Yeah, in addition to the misconception about you have to have a 100-foot tall radio antenna in order to do this, one of the other misconceptions, Ron, is, well, for me to get involved in a ham radio network and just to listen, if that's what I just want to do, or even to, I have to go through this. I have to have a license. I have to go through this extensive process that's going to take me years to do, and I just don't have the time to do that. What's the truth?
Well, I'm trying to get my son to break this mold. He is a technician class license, which is the entry level. Mm-hmm. He's a very successful software engineering manager for a very big $9 billion mortgage origination company. So he's a busy boy.
Yeah.
At 36 years old. But like I said, he's licensed. He just needs to get the next license. So here's what this is. Let me go back just 1 second and address one issue about how easy it is to really get on the air with shortwave. We're privileged here in this area. About 30 miles west of here is one of the last surviving Radio Shacks in the country.
Oh, wow.
The guy who runs it, Ralph Hess, great friend of mine. He has a very ham radio friendly Radio Shack. So I bought a push-up mast from him that has a drive-on tongue that has a slot. I put this mast in. I put a 40-meter dipole, which is 60 feet on each side, wires with a cable that hooks to my radio. I can take that system, that simple system, go out in the field, push this mast up 20, 30 feet, tie off the ends of the wire, hook that radio to my car, to my battery that I have in my car that runs the radios, and hook the coaxial cable, the transmission line up, pick the microphone up, and I'm on the air. It's that simple.
Wow.
It is really that simple. Huh. So I wanted to address that point. Uh-huh. Now let's go back to licensing. We have on our repeater, we have over 70 active users on our repeater.
Okay.
Just to bring home the point that you do not need to be an electronics person or an electrical engineer to do this.
Right. We
have 5 EEs out of that entire group on the radio. 5. That's it. Mm-hmm. We have carpenters. Some of one carpenter we have did some very, very significant work for some of the historical sites here. He's very well respected, but he is not a techie at all. Mm-hmm. We have a person who used to be a high-level manager in a big food distribution company. We have lawyers. We have people who make gaskets.
Well, heck, if a lawyer can do it, anybody can.
Yeah.
I just said. I had to get that.
That's 5 other shows.
Yeah.
Nonetheless.
But you'll never. Hey, you have any docs that do this?
Actually, yes.
Well, be careful of those guys. Be careful of docs because they think they know more than they actually know. So be very careful with those dudes.
And you would know some about.
Oh, that. Yeah, I know them all.
You'd be surprised.
Yeah. Oh.
It's not hard at all. What you do is, first of all, like I said earlier, you listen.
Right.
Get the hang of it, because that will give you the context. Yeah. When you get into the rules and regulations, it's like without that, it's very dry.
Yeah.
But Well, the license content is there for two reasons. First of all, we are the only service out of all the radio services there are, aviation, first responders, EMS, public service, radio navigation, whatever, satellites. We're the only service who can build our own transmitters and do not need to get them tested by an agency.
Oh.
So we have to know the rules and regulations
Right.
to make sure we're not interfering
with
all
all
that
this
other stuff.
Right.
And I know the first question is coming to your mind, well, I'm not going to build my own transmitter. Well, I don't either.
No.
But the thing is this, if I misadjust some of these radios over here, now the modern radios are pretty good because they prevent you from really violating the rules and regulations. But the thing is that if I have a misadjusted radio, or I overdrive my signals, or I go over the legal limit of power, what can happen is I can truly be putting out signals I'm not even aware of that could be interfering with over here local EMS, the local fire, and stuff like that. And this is one of the approach paths for Philly International Airport.
Oh, yeah, no.
I do not want to be on the 108 to 135 megahertz band, excuse me, which is aviation. Excuse me. So anyway, that's what the rules and regulations are there for. The rules and regulations also, or the exam content, and I'll explain the mechanism here in a moment, but the exam content is also there. Excuse me. Take a sip of water here.
Yeah, thank you.
The exam content is also there so that the person getting licensed is not just a box operator.
Yeah.
Because this can get fairly intricate. And for instance, you need to know a little bit about basic electricity and basic electronics. None of these classes, and I'm an extra class licensee and a first class commercial licensee from way back when, so I've got the top FCC licenses. Not to brag, but I've been through the game.
By way back.
The thing is that none of these are there to make you an electrical engineer.
Right.
So let's dispel that. The other thing is that I'm trying to dispel the belief that the license is a barrier to entry.
Right.
It's not. It's there to help you, give you the knowledge, the basic fundamental knowledge that you need to be effective when you communicate. And that includes emergency preparedness type communications. It's not a barrier. You can even say it's less of a barrier than it was back pre-2000 because now there's no code requirement. So bottom line is that there are three classes of license. There's the technician class, which is the entry level. There is the general class, and then there's the extra class. So from bottom to top. The technician class license will give you the ability to use repeaters and local communications, because you're restricted to the very higher frequencies, which by their nature do not go around the world. Got it. They'll go to satellites straight up, or they'll go locally, but they will not go around the world. So you're restricted locally, and that's fine. It's an incentive licensing system. So then basically you say, oh, geez, I want to do long distance. Well, then that's the general class. That's a little more theory, a little more in-depth operating. And that will give you the privileges of operating shortwave. And then of course the extra class gives you all privileges, all bands, at all times. So that's the license class. How to do this? Once you've listened, you can either pick up a book. I teach out of the one that I really like, and that's the licensing manual by Gordon West. And Dave, I can send you some links if you want. Okay. Nonetheless, Gordon West has been doing licensing manuals for years. I used his to get my commercial license back in 1974. Back in the 1800s, when the world was flat and there was black and white TV. Right. So bottom line is that, Gordon West does a great job. He has a similar teaching style to what I have, or I have to him. I could never hold a candle to Gordon, but he's also one of the ones that actually is promoted by the American Radio Relay League.
Oh, okay.
I like his style because what he does is he takes the 400 question pool, which, by the way, is public knowledge. The FCC wants us to know what these questions are. So you can get these questions right off the FCC website. So you have to pass a 35-question exam. The 35 questions are taken at random from this pool, from this 400, and so you need 26 to pass. And you sit in front. You take the exam. You can do it online, and you can find an exam again by using the search engine of your choice, and you can go ahead and you can look for ham radio exams. But again, ARRL.org is a good place to start with that. And so I belong to. What you'll have is you'll if you do this in person or online, you will sit in front of a group of what are called volunteer examiners. And I happen to be a volunteer examiner myself in 3 different groups. And so I help administer exams and actually grade exams and things like that. And somehow or other from teaching, I never got away from grading things somehow.
There you go.
But this is all fun. It's all done nowadays on a tablet. The tablet is locked to a particular website. It has a built-in calculator that doesn't have any memory or anything like that. So everything's all legal and approved by the FCC and everything. And then once you get your license or you pass the exam, then you have to pay a $35 fee for a 10-year license, $350 a year. Bargain at twice.
Yeah, it really is.
Then you will get a set of call letters, and they will be something like my call sign, WA3VEE. The number is the section of the country. New England is 1, New York and New Jersey is 2, 3's Maryland, Pennsylvania, D.C. and Delaware, that kind of thing. So 6 has its own, California has its own, that's 6, so on and so forth. So in any event, once you get that call sign, for whatever class you qualify for, if it's technician, now you're able to actually get on the HT. And I didn't mention this before. You can listen all you want, but unless you're licensed, you can't press this button. You can't transmit. Because if the FCC, now, it's hard to believe that they're going to come to your neighborhood and find you, but you just never know.
Right.
On our repeater, for instance, we have, it's a private repeater. The repeater owner is a good friend of mine. We were in the military together from years and years ago. And he keeps a pretty tight ship because it's his repeater.
Right.
We will find people in violation and we will turn them in. We're a self-policing organization. So there are times, we'll talk about that, there are times when unlicensed people can use that, but only in extenuating circumstances.
But listen to your heart's content.
Yeah. So bottom line is that once you get that license, if you pass the technician class license right there, we will automatically, with no charge, $14 sitting fee, by the way, usually, typically give or take, but that pays for the supplies to do the examining and all that kind of stuff. We don't get paid. We're all volunteer. We can't get paid. It's non-pecuniary interest for this service. So once you get if you pass your technician class, we will automatically say, hey, why don't you try your general? Try it. The last exam I did session, the first Saturday of the month in Claymont, Delaware, we had 2 people walk in with nothing and ended up walking out generals.
Wow.
So let me dispel the fact that there's this unbelievably high amount of information and all this, you need a 3 PhDs in engineering. No. This is not the case whatsoever.
No.
It does take some study.
Right.
But the bottom line is that if you really want to be good at this, if you want to be proficient, and you want to be able to throw up an antenna in an emergency situation and know how long it should be, how high it should be, and what power you'll need, this is what's in the licensing content.
Right.
Okay, so I hope I answered that.
Absolutely. No, it makes it without it. It's like trying to do surgery without knowing anatomy.
Well, yeah, CB.
Right.
CB then. It's a free for all.
Yeah, you can't do surgery if you don't know the anatomy. I mean, it's basic, right?
Exactly.
So, you've been very generous with your time, Ron. So, if folks want to listen, I just want to listen. Okay, you held up that device. You held up a device.
Yeah, this guy here.
Yeah. So they go on Amazon, Walmart, Costco.com, whatever it might be. What do they look for?
This is a company called Baofeng. Baofeng.
Okay.
That is probably the most prolific one out there.
Okay.
These actually, some of the radios that are being sold now, and I'm kind of smiling here as I say this because these radios are relatively what we call clean. And what I mean by clean is that originally when Baofeng first came out with their first radio here in the United States, I think they kind of slipped this in, frankly. Mm-hmm. And we had an old saying, they emitted all kinds of frequencies in addition to the one you were on, which is highly illegal. Mm-hmm. So we had a saying that said, what band does your Baofeng operate on? And the answer was all of them. Yeah. So these are much better these days. This is a UV21, UV17. So you would go out there and just put in on Amazon just Baofeng radios. Okay. And you'll come up with a whole bunch. And generally speaking, I think the most expensive one I think I saw was like $65 or $70. It's been a little while since I looked, but like I said here, this was like I think $25 or $30. It's not very expensive. Now the ones I'm very serious that I would use, like I said earlier in the conversation here, that I would use in public service are more in the order of $175 or $200. Mm-hmm. But those are very rugged. And they're meant to be when you're climbing through woods and climbing through over tree logs that have been downed across a road and things like that, or you're trying to get out, you're in a survival situation. Those are radios I would really depend upon.
Okay, and you mentioned this before. So now you got your order. It comes the next day. Okay, I got it now. Now I want to listen. You mentioned where they go to listen, where folks should go to listen. Could you repeat that? No pun intended, but.
It's called repeaterbook.com. So how do you get all those numbers in here? There's another set of software called RT Systems Software. RT Systems Software. And what you do is you load that into your computer. It's about $50, but what it does is it gives you the software and a cable to connect to the radio from your computer. You enter the frequencies you're interested in this RT system spreadsheet, and you press a button, and it will automatically populate those frequencies.
Wow.
Now, the other thing is, too, these do come with a manual.
Okay.
However, some of it is written in, and I always joked with my Asian friends that I had in industry, my colleagues over there. I said, you guys need to pay more for your translators. But nonetheless, some of the manuals leave a little bit to be desired.
Right.
There are a ton of useful YouTube videos on how to program these things. That is probably more helpful than the
written instructions.
Written instructions, yeah. So that's how you get the numbers from repeater book into the radio. This is so good. This is really good.
And when folks want to, so now they got the radio. They've been listening. All right, I like this. I like this. I really want to get more involved. Mm-hmm. You mentioned this before, but it bears repeating. Okay, I want to go beyond the listening stage. The first couple steps they need to make.
Well, the one thing that you want to do, and this is kind of a double-edged sword. Unfortunately, it's a double-edged sword. First thing you want to do is try to contact the person who runs the repeater. I'm glad you asked this question. Good point. When you hear these call signs, if you want to look me up, by the way, this federal license, something you should know, this federal license is public knowledge. Okay, so if you look me up, any ham, okay, and we'll get back to the question in a second, but any ham in the world, you go to QRZ.com.
QRZ.com.
Yeah, in fact, it's actually one of the sites I have up on one of my monitors on my station over here, QRZ.com, and put in a call sign. For instance, if you put in my call sign, WA3 VEE in the enter query box in the upper left-hand corner, you will have my call sign, my address, which actually is a proxy address. I have a PO box, which is legal. So you don't need to put your home address in there. I have my proxy email, and have information about my station, information about me, and so on and so forth. It's an older picture of what I have here, but nonetheless, you can get information about any ham anywhere. So what you could do is, getting back to the question, you could find out, well, whose repeater is this? You can send them an email and say, hey, you know, I'm interested in amateur radio. I'd like to get involved. I've been listening to your repeater. Could you direct me to people who can actually instruct me? Or in ham radio, in the normal parlance out there, we call it mentoring. Okay, someone who's guiding somebody or whatever. In ham radio, we call it, you're going to laugh at this term, Elmering, just like Elmer.
Elmer Fudd.
I've been an Elmer to literally hundreds and hundreds of people. So many of my students ended up getting licensed from my Elmering. But nonetheless, when I taught at the college. But anyway, that would be the first step. Another step, that usually is relatively successful. The other step that I started to allude to as a double-edged sword is to contact a local club. And the reason I mention a double-edged sword is that the average age these days, and we're trying to fix this, of an amateur radio operator is about 350 years old. Okay, so you go to these clubs, and a lot of these guys are, I'll be very honest with you, and I hope they hear this because I've talked to them about this before, old and crotchety, and they said, well, what do you want to do this for? And all this kind of stuff. It's like, well, just push through that. Push through it. And say, look, I realize you've been doing this for a long time, but get tough love with them and say, look, I really want to do this, and you're going to help me. Okay? So bottom line is, once you break through, then most clubs are not like that. The Lancaster group is wonderful. The Pottstown, Pennsylvania group is wonderful. The Delaware group, they're all very, very good around here. We especially on our repeaters, we don't have a club, but we just have a group. We are very welcoming for new amateur radio operators. And so clubs and talking to the actual repeater operators themselves is very, very, usually very successful at doing that.
And they can obviously cut your time frame down of your education by utilizing those assets. And then when it's time to study for the licensing, you mentioned the books by Gordon West, the review books, right?
Yeah. I'm glad we're back to that. Besides the books, there's a ton of books out there. There are a whole bunch of websites. There's Ham Study. There's Ham Radio Crash Course. Again, using the browser of your choice, if you want to go out and you want to say amateur radio technician class study or general class study, extra, whatever, just go out there and you'll see a whole bunch of books. Like I said, the Gordon West one, and I get nothing for this. Gordon West doesn't even know I exist, and it wouldn't do him any good if he did know. But nonetheless, it's just a very, very good reference because it not only takes each question and tells you, okay, what the right answer is, but it tells you why. It tells you why. So it gives you the background so that you're an educated user for your own benefit to be able to operate a very, very effective station, especially when you have very little time in an emergency situation to get something running. For sure.
Well, Ron, I'd like to thank you for everything you have done, are doing, and will do. And
thanking me for having a good time, Dave. Seriously, I'm thoroughly enjoying this.
No, I am as well, and so are our listeners, I'm sure. And so, Ron, if your call sign WA3VEE, if folks decide they go to Amazon, they get the radio you mentioned, and they say, "Hey, I want to listen to Ron. What's going on a station?" Right? They got to link into the repeater in their area, correct? And then they look for you.
Great point. I am net control for. I can tell you when they can listen to me. Actually, coming up here, if you just give me a minute as we're talking. Our local repeater is actually, and this would thrill me to death if I got on Broadcastify and saw this. But here we go. Nuts on 985. I will tell you when I'm going to be on here, when these guys got me scheduled. Our local repeater here is what's called a 2-meter repeater. And what that means is we're operating in the 144 to 148 megahertz range.
Okay.
What that means is that, just very briefly, your FM band goes from 88 to 108. Well, I often ask my students, well, do you ever wonder what's at 109? Well, that's aircraft. And then we're further up at 144. Well, our repeater is actually, there's a website. It's called W3GMSrepeater.com. W3, we use phonetics a lot of times, but W3, good music station, W3GMSrepeater.com.
Okay.
And that is information about our repeater here. And that will tell you everything. If you go over to a couple of these pages, you'll actually see a picture of me at the repeater site. But bottom line is that we have 2 nets, 2 on-air meetings, both at 8 o'clock Eastern time, and that's local and that's daylight savings times and standard. So it's always 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock on Monday night.
PM, okay.
PM, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
8 o'clock PM on Monday nights, Eastern time, and 8 o'clock on Thursday nights, Eastern time. And I am one of the hosts of the Monday night net is called a workbench. And what that is it's very popular. Sometimes we have 20 or 30 check-ins, stations that call in. What it is, it's 2 parts. First part is each of us, as we check in order, we take a minute and explain, well, what did we do on ham radio in the last week? Usually a whole ton of stuff going on.
Yeah.
And this is where I mentioned, hey, I was interviewed on Operation Freedom. I'd really encourage you guys to send me an email, and I will send you a link to this. I really want you to listen to this. It's really pretty cool. And so the second half is a question and answer period.
Oh, that's good.
Hams will get in and they will say, when they check in, they say, I have a question, and Net Control will go through and they will actually address each individual question. And so a bunch of us will share our experiences. We have a couple really experienced folks on there, and so it's something really kind of cool to listen to. And what you also do is you pick up really good information from that.
Right.
I host the next one. Oh my goodness, it's coming up March 24th. So I will be the host, the host, or what we call it. It's really Net Control. It's the host. I will be hosting the workbench at 8 o'clock Monday night Eastern time, March 24th. On Thursday nights, we have what's called a roundtable, which is more what we call in ham radio a rag chew session. So we get on and we just kind of talk and just have fun and stuff like that. And that is on Thursday nights at 8 o'clock. And that will be at, let's see, the next one I host of that, I think will be the same week. So you get a double dose if you really want to get a full dose of listening to me. I don't know why you would want to do that, but nonetheless, I have a lot of fun running these. I have almost a teleprompter that I read the script from. It's really pretty cool. And I do it all from here, right from the station.
Wow.
So roundtable host schedule looks like I am up March 27th.
There you go.
So the week of March 24th, 8 o'clock Monday and 8 o'clock Thursday night. Here's how you listen. You go over to Broadcastify.
Broadcastify.com.
Yeah, and I'm going to do that now. Make sure. Here it is here. Yeah, and when you get on Broadcastify, you go to Listen.
Yeah.
And you'll see a map of the United States.
Yep.
And what you do is you click on Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
And then you click on the lower right-hand corner. That will be Chester County.
Mm-hmm.
Once you click on Chester County, you scroll down, you go almost to the bottom of the list, and you will see W3GMS 146985 megahertz repeater.
Mm-hmm.
And that is where you would listen to me. without a radio. That's anywhere in the world. You could be in Zimbabwe.
That's great.
Internet, and you can listen to us. So we're worldwide.
Ron, I'd like to thank you.
Well, you're quite welcome.
You are a wealth of information and, in fact, very inspiring, because the communication side of this equation, you know, we all think about, well, I got to have storable food, storable water, which is obviously very important.
Yeah.
But we also have to communicate. And I thank you, Ron, because you have already inspired tremendous number of people around our country, frankly, and around the world, in getting more involved on the communication side of the equation. And I'd like to thank you, Ron, for everything you have done, are doing, and will do. And I'd like to thank you folks for joining us. Until next time, Dave Janda signing off. Dream big and dare to fail. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much, Dave.
Thank you, Ron.
Bye now.